All right, we are live. Let's double check that everything is working. Welcome to. Oh, cool. We are live. All right. It's been a long time since we did live on this in this group. I'm super excited. OG group members are gonna remember us doing live keyword research challenges a year and a half ago. There's going to be similar things. There's going to be exciting things, but I'm super excited for today. We have 10 people watching here. Hey guys, good to see you. Please introduce yourself if you like. Would love to hear where you're coming from. What do you do? Make sure to comment. We're going to be giving away some goodies to people who participate. All right. Awesome. Hi, Henry. Here we go. Henry, we have some group members whose identity I'm not going to be able. I'm not Gordana. Obviously not Gordana. Not as closely as beautiful or engaging, but you're going to like me, guys. I promise. Sup, homie. Hello. Guys, we're going to start in just a moment. Oh, there we go. Here's G. So let me see right here. So I want to say hi to all of the new group members. For those of you who have no idea who I am, because I'm not Gordana, obviously. My name is Bojan. I'm the director of SEO and content distribution and co-founder at Workello.com. I want to tell you a little bit about my team and what they did in the last 2 years. Since we started producing content, we've achieved 30 million organic visitors across a variety of projects, published 12,000 pages of content with 250,000 keywords ranking on page 1. We have 3,500 SEOs and marketers using our tools, and we've hired more than 100 writers. What I would like you to do is go visit Workello.com. There's a lot of playbooks there that you can check out. Also, there's a bonus of you completely messing with my attribution channels, because if you do, I'm going to be like, what the hell are these signups from direct visits? So, go do that. Plus, every signup goes into me raising money to buy a much newer map, so I can continue with my world domination. So thank you for that. That would be awesome. All right. Without further ado, I have someone special I want to introduce today, and it's my good friend Pankil, who's the CEO and founder of Outranking.io. Go ahead and mess with his attribution channels as well. Just visit the website directly. Nobody doesn't have to know came from. Hey man, nice to see you. Here's for people to know which website to visit. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's good to see you again.
Yeah. Listen, we talked about this, but we kind of planned out this show. We wanted to do some very interesting and exciting things with you showing us examples, dive deep into some theory about these things, talk about content briefs, everything that people really like. And then the big G, which is not Gordana, goes ahead and releases news about an update, and everybody goes insane about what's going to happen with AI content. So I'm so glad that we postponed this for 1 week.
I agree. The timing could not have been any better.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we start, let me just announce something really nice from the team from Outranking. If you guys participate in commenting and asking questions during this live, the guys are gonna give out 6 months free use of Outranking, and you'll be able to join more than 12,000 SEOs and and writers using this amazing tool. We're going to do a lottery after this live has been finished, and one lucky winner will receive this. I think there might be some more goodies, but I'm going to leave Pankil to reveal that later. All right. Let me, before we kind of also start talking to the community in the comments and everything else, I wanna ask you to like kind of take a step back from what we have been, what we really want to talk about, and that's the helpful content update as well. I want to ask you, number one, so how the hell can AI content be identified just in the first place? Like, give us like sort of a your views on that and how that works.
So I'm going to try and explain this in a very simple context, and I have a few slides that will demonstrate that. But
nice.
in a simple context, everything that's machine generated is generated using some sort of algorithm, right? That runs in the background and figures out the probability of what text should come after a particular word that was just written, right? So it's easier for anybody, for even a human, right, to take shortcuts, right? Like when you find it. So it's no different with AI, right? Like, so it's going to try and find shortcuts to the possible end, right? And that means that it's going to generate text based on probability. And it lacks a certain type of surprises and elements that only humans can add to it. And this means more than, just you doing some black hat and adding ums and r's and making the construction of sentences like grammatically wrong. Like, okay, you might trick it once, but then you fall off the ground and here comes the update, and tomorrow you're starting all over again, right? Like, or switching careers maybe. So you don't want to keep doing that, right? So yes, in simple context, if anything that's written using a mathematical algorithm can be essentially some sort of somewhat tracked by another mathematical algorithm, right? And that's exactly what Google can do. And there are many examples of that. Like, a simplest and most dumbest one is the one that I saw on Hugging Face by like GPT-2. That's very basic. Like, I could show something that's a little better than that, but that's very basic, right? Like in this GPT-2, GPT-3 text, and it doesn't matter any AI you take it, they all are using the same thing to power this text generation, right? So yes, it can be predicted in a similar fashion as you write it.
So did you want to like pull up that example right now, or
yeah, absolutely.
Help us visualize this?
Share screen. I want to share the screen and window.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so like, I wanted to give a brief intro, but everyone, we'll save that for later, right? Like, let's focus on education right now. So go to the next one, and I'll just put in a word over here, Machu Picchu. Can you guess like what could be the next word that comes after that?
Is.
Okay, all right. So let's go next, right?
Oh, hell yeah, I'm better than a robot, baby.
No, this is a robot predicted too. so is and was, right? Like, so there's very little thinking, right? Like, so you just went straight to the shortcut and found the closest thing that you can find, identify right now to reveal it. And that's what an AI does too. So it's telling you that Machu Picchu is or was. Like, that's the two routes that it's taking. And there could be a few more with a little more thinking. But if you elaborate on is, then what really happens is that is a or located, right? Like, it's a location, we know that. And you're going to is a, or Machu Picchu is located, and then you fill in the gaps for the next few sentences, right? Now, the probability, let's say you have 10 words in the top probability. Like, these are the obvious things that I can guess that comes next to a particular word. That's 10. Then there are some harder terms that if you thought a little more, you might have been able to predict 100 more words that go, in that form. And then there are some surprise elements that only humans can add, right? So what does this look like if a human was writing it that was well thought out and was like really trying to provide value up front, right? Like, so Machu Picchu, also spelled as Machu Picchu is, right? Like, so you'd go on like that. And now you understand, like, this kind of guesses, right? Like, it's very difficult for AI to make unless explicitly provided that factual information, which is how you spelled it, right? Like how you pronounce it or whatever it is. The next one is Machu Picchu, and you start with a comma and say located in province of I don't know how I can never pronounce that, but Urubamba, right?
You
Like,
and me both, but
yeah, so something like that, right? So you see the visible differences. This is well thought out content that is aimed at providing value first, right? And then taking them deeper into the journey as to explaining what is Machu Picchu in detail. But this just cannot do that. Not unless you explicitly keep providing in tons and tons of feedback, and you are only doing short sentence closures, right? Like you're only doing sentence completions, like Google is suggesting. Google Docs suggests you sentence completions now. So things like that, right? So that is more productive because I don't have to go and constantly rewrite the entire concept of the content that was written, right? Like that's just starting
right.
over or deleting it like at least 4 or 5 times before you get to something which is 10 or 20% closer to what you want to write. So what happens is that well, the content that is generated is completely logical. It's not bad. Like I wouldn't say bad or good, right? Like, but it's content, and essentially just very, very bad content, right? Like that's written for an audience that will laugh at it if they see this. And over the period of time, Google will predict this. So how will they predict this, right? Like, so this is a practical example. This text is generated using GPT-3, okay?
Okay.
And this was a text that I entered in it, and the only context was text generation. Everything else was generated by AI. Now you see that all the green part, they fall into the top 10 keyword that I could have guessed or an AI could have guessed. The yellow ones are the top 100 ones that I could have guessed. How many are the ones which are belong in that thousandth range, right? None, besides the one that I added. What did they
Mhm.
tell me? That I've used completions after completions after completions to actually build my content, right? It's super easy to predict this. And yeah, sure, maybe you can add, those small ums and ahs and whatever, but it still doesn't mean that you're going to provide a good user experience. So now that also comes into effect, right? Like, so at the end of the day, you're going to lose if you are following this particular practice. Now, let's go and look at something that was generated by human. So not a single word falls. So this is the same sentence that I wrote down here, and it's not carefully written, it's just written. And I'm just explaining the above text. You see how many surprises that it has. Now, this is beyond the 1,000 guesses that the AI could have predicted, the purple ones, right? So this tells me that the construction of this sentence is quite complex, and it has those surprise elements that human can easily insert, and it's not extremely readable like the AI has it, but it's not extremely boring, right? So you can put a percentage of text on your website has this sort of patterns that falls into not useful category. And this is just a prediction. Like, so don't take my word for it, right? Like it's not exactly how Google might do it, and there might be 1,000 other parameters to it. But if someone put an engineer in charge of finding this out, right? Like this is the most logical step that they would take in order to nail that down. Now, just based on this understanding, you can see that it's super easy actually to predict this, and this happens in fractions of seconds. Okay, so pasting a 2,000 word article, this happens in fractions of seconds. So while Google, actually my slides keep skipping, but while Google it's looking at your website, right? Like the scanning process can take time, and it can take some time before it understands all of these and it runs these patterns, right? Like there might be so much processing required, but it's possible. So what that says that if there is like even remotely 10% of people generating this crap content that lives on the web, right? Like something has to be done so quality can stay up front, so the engine can stay relevant, right? Like that's exactly what Google is doing with this update, is trying to find the content that is not useful. And what I mean by useful content is also something like this, but this, right? Like, so read this sentence. Like, content marketing is the most important thing businesses need in today's world. Like, Like, do you need a cookie? Like, that's genius, right? Like, I don't need to be told that when I'm looking at a content marketing guide, right? Like, this is a useless sentence that is generated by AI just because, right? Like, it provides some context to why I'm telling you that benefits of content marketing is the topic of my blog post, and it's telling me that I should be writing this. Like, this is not useful at all. The way I would say is that content marketing has essentially 10 benefits that businesses can take away today and start accelerating, something like that, right? Like, more punchful, right? Like, so this is a repeated pattern that we've been seeing on many blogs, right? Like, many people who create consistently content and at a very high velocity. And if you do that enough, you're assured, like, the velocity helps you rank, right? Like, but then Google goes around and pulls out this updates where it sees the content that you've written and sees, okay, there's no value here. Like, literally, I would not even read it, waste a second over here, right? So that's exactly what we're demonstrating with this. But you get the point. This is how it's detectable.
Understood. So basically, what I've heard from you is like kind of two things. One is certain things can be detected. It just takes time if we're talking about Google. And then the second thing I heard here was, crap content is crap content. It doesn't matter if it has been spun from a human being's hand or an AI. Let me drop a couple of questions here from the comment section. This is kind of an exciting, almost philosophical one. Chris says, what happens when AI produces content like the human examples you gave? And you think that's kind of something that's possible?
If it was well, there's always things that are possible, right? But how much of a possibility can you bring to the table is the question, right? Whether
Mhm.
you can totally go from point A, complete that A, B, C, D all the way to Z without human touch is not going to be possible in a very short run. But you can bridge some gaps, right? And Outranking try to does some of the bridge gapping, like right now too. But we use extensive summarizations, right? So we summarizations to not build out your content first initially, but to do research. So we can go through and read 1,000 lines or 10,000 words in multiple pages and extract the things which are relevant to your research, so your writers can, or you can create some amazing content from that research, right? Uh, but and then if you choose, you can influence the AI with that data to write around it. But again, it's not going to be 100% human proof, right? Like, you need humans involved to make those facts adjusted. And like I said, right, like, there are many things that AI cannot do, and one is statistics, right? Like, it cannot consistently talk about certain types of statistics in creative writing when it's doing, right? Like, it's a challenge that AI faces. Like, if you cannot back the data about anything that you're writing about, right? Like, so what authority does your content hold really, right? Like, it's not engaging at all. So you can use it for, maybe, if you have 10 steps in content creation process, maybe you can use it for 6 7, but that 8 9 10 or 9 10 of review, editing, bringing in additional value to the content, right? Like, writing your unique perspective besides the research that's existing on the SERP, right? Like, you're going beyond that. You're finding more information, more facts that you want to include, and construct a research that took you time, right? Like, that you put efforts in to actually build it. And that is what we help you do. Yes, go ahead.
Sorry to hear me. Right? That makes so much sense. Like, if there's this back and forth about what quality means, how things should look and not look, and I'm like super excited for us to jump into you showing us all of the things that are possible. But I feel like the thing that you mentioned here regarding AI is not capable of like kind of showing through statistics and factual stuff what are the conclusions within the text, which just reminds me of like research paperwork, and it's like that's the higher quality from, let's say, a newspaper article or an investigative piece of journalism, which is a higher quality than any kind of a content piece. And it kind of just it just came to my mind just right away when you were talking about this. And I'm going to drop a question here. And just because I think a lot of people ask this, but I want to bring you
A
back. Yeah,
comment. It's a
go
quick
ahead.
comment, right? Like when we're in colleges, right? Like so, like you always tend to find like this paper that your seniors have written, right? Like, and then you can maybe modify, tweak it, and only to publish it and realize that your teacher found out that someone published this last year, right? Even without having those mechanisms of scanning for plagiarism back then, right? Like it was still so obvious, right? Like so get away from it.
Yeah. Completely makes sense. All right, this is what people ask me a lot. I think there's so if you're doing a hybrid approach, do you have a percentage of human versus AI content? I feel like there's already a misconception in the question here. Am I wrong?
100%. You're right on. Actually, there's a misconception, right? Like, what does that
Let's talk about
hybrid
that.
approach? What does that hybrid approach like really look like, right? That
Yeah.
hybrid approach is actually what I suggested. It could mean a lot of things. Like your hybrid approach could be sentence completion, which is totally okay because you've added most amount of value that you wanted to add in the sentence, and you're using it to just complete a couple of words after that, or things that would just not get you to stop. Then there is another aspect which I suggested in Outranking, whereas you research it. Like so, using AI to generate this, initial first draft of concepts that you want to include in it, that's reducing your workload of actually creating quality content by significant amount because you're now have a complete research in it. That's a second approach. And a third approach is going to be always creative writing. So I'm not saying you cannot write intro paragraphs or conclusions or certain aspects of your content that could be creatively generated by AI, right? Like that's absolutely fine. And there are some amazing tools that does that. Creative generations, right? And that's essentially what AI was built for, like creative generations and summarizations, right? People are trying to use it for text generation, and it's a very different thing.
We have a really cool question here. I was just like, I have to jump in. You've the thing that we talking about research and everything. So this question is, why is it bad at
So
research, especially providing specific numerical data analysis, et cetera, et cetera?
So it's not bad at research. If you ask it to extract data from existing data, it will extract it. But if you ask it to write around data, it's not confidence, right? So here is like the next slide. If you see here, these are some major
Mhm.
things that AI lacks, right? So AI relies on confidence probability, right? If it is not confidently able to say that this data is factual and it is exactly what something is had to suggest, so it's going to try and avoid that, and that's what happens in majority of the cases. Unless explicitly told or given background information, it cannot work up the confidence, right? So you can do small generations, but when you're doing long form blog writing, it's continuous generation, right? And at least that's what the perceived information is. People are using it to build in, like everything together, right? If you were to build some small parts of that section with AI, that's totally fine. Where you use creative, where you use research, and where you use human abilities to add more value and make it more powerful reader friendly content, that's absolutely fine as well. And like the other thing is that like hybrid approach is also means like you're adding your own expertise. Like AI is not going to be able to read your mind, right? So the expertise that I have as an SEO working for 15 years in this field, I am not going to rely on AI to give me advice about that, or update or Google update that's happening tomorrow, like next week, right? Like it's just not going to work. So you can absolutely take hybrid approach, and you should take hybrid approach because this is going to be the new norm. But use it for creative writing shorter pieces out of it, using extensively for research because it can do actually a lot more thing in research than writing, for long form at least, right? Like for social posts and stuff like that, it's absolutely fine. We're not talking about that, but this is absolutely essential. And think about this: like we're talking about one approach where you are creating content from end to end, but this doesn't work in terms of a process. How do you set up a process and give exact guidelines so that the next person can do their job properly and make sure that you can actually scale that production, right? It only happens to process, and for a process you cannot have this complications of understanding language nuances and how AI build out the specific content pieces and do all of these things together, right? So you need to set up a process, and if that involves in just writing about generic topics like flowers and bees and stuff like that, AI will do a wonderful job, right? Like it has seen
Yeah.
that data like 1,000 times. but where you need to add value, insights, and facts, and show that research, the content that you've written, and the audience matters to you, it's not going to perform well. So,
So guys, we're gonna talk about Pankil's gonna show us really cool examples, but before that, here's a little comment. I'm not so sure that the humans will win. I'm sure there's gonna be Judgment Day. AI will win, but I guess a really good segue for us into what I wanted to ask you next. So yeah, this commenter is saying that AI is good for at what is, but the creation of value content is something that humans need to do. And Pankil, I want to ask you about yesterday, and I've been talking to a lot of people. A lot of them are already refreshing Google Analytics, even though the rollout is not happening yet, because who knows if it's happened already. Everything is a week ahead, and all the other stuff. So what was your first impression and reaction?
so Google said this is like a site-wide signal that detects low value, right? So the main takeaway that I take is like a percentage of content that on your site is not useful, because every site has some sort of useful not useful content, right? Like every site does. Things that, well, it could be product documentation that was 20 years ago, right? It could be webinar pages that was 20 years ago, things like that. There's a lot of valuable content that could be not valuable content now on your site. The second is there could be a lot of thin content on your site, right? Like things that just don't add additional value, but it adds to your crawl budget. It adds to the to how much Google has to work now to scan your website and find another filthy content, right? Like, so that's what they're trying to avoid and have people clean that out, right? So and this sort of also falls for AI content, right? Like if you have generated tons of generic content that is not only here but everywhere else, and those sites have, practically a better topical authority in those niches, why would they credit you for that, right? Like, so they're going to take away those powers, and that's what it means. It's going to be a site-wide update. They're potentially also looking at user experiences on that page, right? And that could involve like many things, but content quality, things that don't need to be looked at by anybody, right? Like just take it off. And one of my suggestions in our group, right? Like I posted the 8 things that you can actually do. One was, right, like if you find this kind of content that's been there for ages, it has backlinks, internal links, and stuff like that, but it's dead content and it's crap, right? You can take it out and replace it with something, or just a small summary of what that page was about, like before. Just leave those pages out there for right now, and then work up the way to add new content on those pages, make them more relevant over the period of time. So you don't really lose the page rank, right? Like you don't really lose the connections that you build to that page, and now have to rewire everything and then rewire later, right? Like you can think about that later. Like you don't have that much time now, right? So
It's
go
true.
for it.
My
Go for
Twitter
it and
feed is filled with people saying I'm deleting pages this weekend, which
start.
I had to say I kind of agree with. There's a lot of people who know me here know that I like deleting pages as much as posting them. So burn it all. But yeah, it makes a complete sense. One more question, and then because I really want to jump into what you have prepared for us. One more question from my side, and then we'll take some questions from the audience at the end of the live. What types of websites do you feel are going to be hit the most? I feel also there's a misconception between what programmatic content means and AI content. What's quality and not quality? It can be both AI and programmatic and quality content, because maybe you're serving a set of pages, thousands and thousands of pages, responding to intent that's maybe technical, mathematical, or whatever. Like that's the first thing that comes to mind. So what types of pages, and maybe what types of website owners should be worried?
So I think the majorly think about products, think about programmatic SEO as well, but it really depends. Even programmatic SEO websites, right? Like, so what you'd consider programmatic is it Yelp? Is it something else that's summarizing the pages and giving you like a list of other information that could be found elsewhere. It could be G2, right? Like all those review pages, which have like just like very thin amount of content, which is in terms of uh, the details that they have themselves written. But think about the comments. Think about the reviews that people have written on those pages as well, right? Like they tend to occupy a majority of the dense information on that page, right? Because it's like 100 reviews on a particular page. That's great stuff. Because that's just like 1,000 times more content than what they would have added programmatically, right? So that adds value. So that's why like it's a site-wide update, and it's going to be heavily percentage driven, and they'll probably even be cautious. So not a lot of people lose ranking, right? Like, work like tune this over the period of time. But those can be heavily affected product review sites, right? Like you're writing reviews, and just because you're after velocity, which many SEOs are, the major compromise happens on the research part, right? So they'll scan through the top 20, found everything, let's put it together, and we're done, right? Like let's roll this out. Like, okay, your content is not better than any other unique perspectives those guys present. Yeah, sure, you can make it happen in a few percentage out of every 10, but it's not consistent, right? So you want a process that is consistently helping you rank. So
Poor product review people. This is like the third update in a row. But yeah, I hear it.
well, you know what? Like this might have happened to many SaaS owners, maybe, right? Like when you start like writing, you start seeing reviews after reviews after reviews online, right? Like, and you're like, like, okay, like my product doesn't even do this, right? Like nowhere close to this, right? Like there's just no unique research, right? Like they found something somewhere and just included it without using the product at all, right? So it lacks the expertise, and you want to immediately bounce and find something which is more useful.
Oh man, I hear you. I the last time I was at the gym, I spent 20 minutes obsessing about this really negative review of Workello, which turned out someone was writing about a completely different brand, but the first three reviews were spelled Workello. So I just like, oh my god, I went so deep. Anyways, let's. I could you give us an intro on outranking a little bit before we jump into some of the really exciting stuff you want to talk about? And that's like how to like the flows that you guys use to create content briefs. I know our audience is really interested in that. And then also kind of have a look at how your writing flows look like. I think that's what you've prepared for us, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yes. Okay, so let me start sharing my screen here again.
Mm-hmm.
Minimize this and share. And I'll give a brief intro about what we are doing, because I'm not going to show everything that we currently have, and we have a platform that does like really some cool stuff. So I'm going to show some cool stuff pertaining to our topic, and I believe my screen's visible now. All right.
Yep,
So,
you are there.
Yep. All right. So what outranking really does is three main things. One, well, not the three things that you see on the screen. Okay. It's actually researching content, optimizing content, and helping you build topical authority. And we do this all with AI. Okay. So like we're using extensive AI in all of these fragments. And if you see GPT-3, it's not only used for writing. We use GPT-3 for helping you build topical models too. So we'll show you how that really works. But we'll start with content brief. And in the content brief, I'm going to choose a topic which is a bit tedious, right? Like Quillboard alternatives, right? And I choose it because like GPT-3 is not going to know this. If you ask it the top three, like try it. Okay. If you, I'm sure you guys have many tools, AI tools, right? Go and type out Quillboard alternatives, put an enter, type one dot, and see how many alternatives it gives you, right? Like it's not going to give you anything that we have. But you start with the Quillboard alternative, and if you want to write about those alternatives, you need like tremendous amount of research and briefing process that the writers can take, add their additional value, go find some additional information, include in it, and kind of pack the entire content together and give it to you, right? So you start by going with advanced, and these are some of the easy ones, right? Like if you have like a very extensive process, but we'll start with advanced. And I've sort of launched the AI wizard for us. So this is what the next screen looks like. We help you generate the title, but it's up to you to sort of map it and create your most optimized title. So if you have an extensive briefing process where you give titles, you give description, you give outline, and additional briefing details, or in many cases, what we do is we also provide research. That means like these are the things that we want to talk about in each of the sections, right? Like things like that. So we'll look at that process. So and then generate a brief at the end. So we generate a title, we'll optimize that, edit it, generate a description, optimize, edit it, and then it will automatically generate an outline. But what I've done here is, through my experience, I've sort of created an outline just for one spinboard alternative. So you know how the research process and everything works over here. But you can scan through SERPs and you can add stuff, you can generate more H3 ideas. But since you're talking about things that only SERP or we wouldn't use AI in it, right? Like you'd use actual data to figure things out and add value on top of it. So you prepare your outline and then you generate the research, and we go to the next page. Now, this is something that nobody has seen, so many of our audiences are still going to find this new. It's not upcoming release, but I'm writing about what is Quillbot. Like this does not exist in the SERP data. Everybody's talking about Quillbot alternatives, it doesn't exist, right? How do I find it? We can go and do the deep research for you. We can go and help find out what is Quillbot and help you find the research that you can include in your content. And just with one click, like you can insert the research, you can find more data that you want to include, right? Like you can copy it into your brief, right? So that you're preparing. And like, so I have my entire brief about the outline, like this is what I'm generating. So what I will do now is like, I'm using highlights as a key point. And for Spinboard Pros, I am going to use benefits and pros, right? And there are many other templates that you can use. And similarly, you can use disadvantages for each of the sections, right? And yes, it's a little bit of process, right? Like, but if you're building like super detailed brief, and then you can choose your own template, or you can use the template that we provided. I'm going to use a template for a briefing that I have generated, and just click apply and then generate the brief, right? And then it's going to generate the brief. When it generates the brief, it's not only generating this guidelines that are super customizable, has all the keywords, has all the NLP terms and everything in it. But what it's really doing is it's building out the writing brief, like everything around. So what I want to write about Quillbot, these are the most important things, fragments of information that we found from the research, that the raw research, okay? It can be unstructured, it can be reviews, it can be anything that you provided, either through our tool or through your custom research. We can break it down into concepts that are digestible and easier for your writers to write around without missing the core information or facts that you'd want to include. It can also build out pros. So this is all automation. This is 100% automation. We use the same information that we provided it for Quillbot for the first paragraph, and we generated the highlights out of it. We generated pros out of it. So you see it has more characters, things like that, right? Like, so it's finding out those alternatives, arranging your raw research into a more structured research where if you're briefing them and it missed out a point, it's easier for you to add and complete the brief and send it to them before they start writing, or they can build upon it, they can finish it up, right? Like polish this and bring in more details if you want them to. It's so easy to add value on something that is research, right? Like it's easier to pinpoint things that are missing and add more value than writing the whole content. Now, like understand this. So we've done this, right? And what will the AI would have done? And we will use, although this method is used for creative writing, right? So I'm going to use a creative writing method, and we'll see how many of these facts are infused in it. And I will show you a summarized modular way of writing, which can also build out, but more factual information. So this is draft. When we click draft, it's going to use this facts to create the draft out of it, right? And it's going to build out that specific passage. But what it's going to do is it's going to be derived from that information, not using that information. So it's more creative, and it can exclude many of the facts that you were talking about, or it could include many of the facts that you were talking about. But when you are, let's delete this, and when you are actually summarizing it, like say, I want to just talk about this 3 points, and let's talk about that. It can build out a section which is around those core concepts and relates to your heading. Okay, we'll just wait. wrote it somewhere. Yeah, so that's what I mean. Like, I'm gonna generate it again, but it wrote it somewhere.
And while you're generating that, let me ask you a question. How would you, do you have any opinions on how would you define a role of that person designing those briefs, maybe on a scale? Is that the role of the editor within the team?
Nope.
Would you say it's, something writers will do, or people would, different people would own it? And then if you have some sort of data, this is most interesting to me, like as a former content manager once upon a time. Like, what is how efficient can I be with outranking on a daily
So
level when it comes to briefs, let's say?
So, all right, one person. All right. So the way you can imagine creating the briefing process is it can happen and it depends on the personas involved for a particular piece and how important it is versus how much depth it needs and subject matter expertise it needs. But everything starts with an SEO specialist, right? Like, or an SEO would go and create this optimized briefs first, find all the information which is relevant, include that. An SEO specialist can do this. And once they curate this brief, and if it doesn't need an additional layer of subject matter expertise, right? Like, so if you're writing about what is an SEO company, it's relatively easier to find the tips and tricks and things that you can add value and build upon it. When you're like really comparing Jira versus Asana, and
Yeah.
you need like, subject matter expertise, you can add the subject matter expert to go in and add a few bullet points that they think is missed out in it, right? Super easy. And then pass it on to the writer so they can put it together, they can create the content, and then get it for review. So it becomes much more streamlined. You can have an editor in place as well at the very end if you're like stickler for like branding, brand perspective, and brand and voice and tone and things that you're using. You can add that additional layer, but um, yes, so it's like essentially there's 3 or 4 components to it: SEO specialist, then the writer, either subject matter expert comes before that or not, and then finally the editor. But yeah, this is more or less the process that we use for outranking as well.
And how would you, what would you say is, how much more easier is the job for the writer receiving this? Like, have you heard some type of feedback in that sense when they receive this type of feedback? Like, oh, here I am producing XYZ as compared to me having to dig whatever, thing that I wouldn't even know where to start.
Exactly. So this is like this information that I showed you
Mm-hmm.
was potentially taken from 40 or so pages, right? And digested into this nice little neat thing, right? So what we work with extensive writers, right? We were providing them first drafts, like at the very initial stage when we thought like AI can really do it, but we realized that it's just not possible, right? Like it's learning process. So we learned, and then we started doing this. This can be a little different if you are a solopreneur, you're writing end-to-end content, you can
Mm-hmm.
use AI all the way through and then start adjusting your content. But what our writers said was like they did not need to go and do so much additional research. They still had to do a little bit, right? But it was reduced to 10%. We like a writer would literally go and write 2,500 word sort of topics, 2 topics per day with a brief that is so solid that it doesn't need additional research. Like it has research, it has citations, it has everything mentioned in it for you to kind of just, start working through it.
That sounds like insane numbers. I mean, it's amazing. But I've interrupted you. Please, I just wanted to jump in with these questions. It's super. Let me get your screen back on.
Yes. No.
There we go.
Okay. So I was showing the writing skills of some of the outranking, right? And we're
Mhm.
everything about SEO. So our optimization goes very deep, and not just the topic level, right? Like this is one of the core updates that they say that is useful content. Like think about this: if you've been writing with many tools who tend to tell you how many keywords you need to include in your content in order for it to have a certain amount of score, that's keyword stuffing, right? Like come on. If I was to only do that and be able to rank, like what happened to the additional value, right? Like you'd still miss that out. So I, from my practical experience, will tell you this. I have deliberately excluded 30, 40, 50% of the topics that was suggested by any of the tools. And I've still been able to consistently rank, like, SEO outlines. You can check like SEO outline. We beat Ahrefs to that. How? It's because you have valuable insights, a unique point of perspective. You're still following all the best SEO practices and doing the job according to a human would want to do. So that's exactly what we suggest, and our score is relative to the information that we find. That's another beautiful thing about outranking. And yes, we do AI writing too, but in the process that we suggested, there's also a very clever thing that we do, and it's also relevant to the score update, which is topical relevancy. If you are writing content about a certain type of a niche or certain subject again and again, you tend to have perceived authority in that topic, right? And it's easier for you to be able to rank that versus someone writing about, blogging. The other topic is about finance, and like it's all over the place. Those signals don't add up. You cannot have authority or you cannot have expertise in all of these fields, right? Like it has to be a certain amount of things. So how do you build topical authority is one of our other features, which actually connects to your Google Search Console. It connects with all the keyword research data that you need in order to build topical authority and understand the gap levels, right? And you can run an analysis. So it'll break down all the topics and their clusters into a systematic format, suggesting you like what is your coverage against what could be your total coverage of keywords you can totally rank for, right? And because it's connected with Search Console, it can also pick up signals that you wouldn't essentially do. So what we do with the Search Console data is we use AI again on top of that Search Console data to figure out trends that are helping your content rank. Like, so if we find certain amount of terms with certain amount of volume, with certain amount of CPC and certain amount of difficulty levels you consistently rank for, we can identify those trends. And when you are exploring clusters to add to your strategy, we can suggest to you that these keywords are going to be easy win for you from what we have seen in your training data. So using, again, AI very cleverly here, not to generate content, but help you build topical authority. And
This
you can
is
build
fantastic.
out.
I love the connection with the Google Search Console.
Thank you. There's one more part to it. Like, so you might see many topics that you essentially rank for, right? In many positions, right? So, or you have perceived authority in because like you don't have any good content for it, but you have perceived authority, so you started ranking for it. It's a very good opportunity to start creating content for it, or even optimizing it. So like certain topics that I rank at 5 or 6, I'd still add them to my strategy, because then when I'm creating a plan for my month and executing content and actually figuring out which keywords will bring me the most amount of value, I just have to go and sort this and find out which keywords I need to track and improve and which keywords I need to create new content for. And I just execute this on monthly basis, my plan. And so my plans like build out for 50, 60 topics that we are publishing every month, right? Like I have a plan for it. And there are certain topics that I'm optimizing. We have a plan for it through this strategy. So this is a second very clever thing we do along with briefing and writing. There's also actions part, and I'm not going to get too deep into the product. Like it's not a product pitch. So just some cool things I wanted to show, but that's about it.
That is amazing. No, I love it. This is really cool. I want to call the audience to oh, there you go. I call the audience to like share some ask us more questions. We're with you for another 12 minutes or so. Michael, this was so awesome. I know I shared the free 6 months gift you brought here for one lucky audience member, but you wanted to share something else as well, I think.
Yes, absolutely. So anyone who's interested in outranking, right? Like, and things where the direction that we are going is super helpful, right? Like we're aiding the writing process and not trying to replace writers, right? Come join us. We have a 50% off for the very first month, so you can try it out. But there's also a quick refund you can do if you don't find value in it. So go ahead and get exploring, right? Like connect your site, build out your plans for the next 6 months of the content that you want to execute. Start working with some briefs that you'd send out to your writers, right? Like customizing some of those briefs so your process and your branding and tone and everything fits that workflow, and start educating your virtual assistants or SEO specialist that are working on your projects, and how you can create this brief for the writers.
That is amazing. I'm going to put that on the screen as well.
And yes, Natalie is going to share the code to get in. We also have a content accelerator that we do, and we're running one on the 29th where we'll show how people can be successful in building out a process and really working with AI and figuring this out, like to aid your process, do things faster, but not take shortcuts. So register for that as well. And Natalie will provide a link to that as well in the comments.
That is amazing. Let me see what we have. Oh, there you go. It's already there. I'm guessing this is the code.
Yes.
No one else would post this. Hopefully, we don't have profiles connected here. God damn it, Facebook! Next time we're doing this on YouTube. No, just kidding. Don't lower our reach. Pankil, let me jump to a couple of questions if we have them here, and we'll be wrapping up quite soon. Give me 1 second. So I had one that's, I think, back to, oh, here it is. It's this one came on before you shared your screen, but
yeah, I saw that, and I was like, I was just about to show an example on Google.
I was like, oh look,
that was timely too.
Yeah, it was perfect. I was like, what was Pankil seeing this on the side? All right, let me see here. I think I went through all of them. I saw an interesting one at the very beginning. Okay, here's one for us to kind of. I don't see any new ones coming up. So this, I don't know if you see it on your screen, Pankil, but what are your thoughts about Google will be able to change their AI to reflect the human condition, or just like, I guess, improving more and more? Maybe we ended with kind of a prediction from your side. When is something like that realistic?
It's imminent, right? Like the behavior of humans who are digesting this content is going to change over the period of time. Like look at this, like, you know, our attention span is just going lower and lower and lower, right? Like now we read what, on a 1,000-word article, we read about 100 words, maybe that scan it, right? Like real quickly, and get what we need and bounce, right? Like, so the behavior is going to quit changing. And if you see every update that Google is trying to make, it's towards the better experience of those changing conditions, right? So it's imminent. You see more and more questions being answered, like in the search query, right? Like someone posted that as well, as you know, this pause and this featured snippets coming up and things like that, right? So, well, that's still very basic, right? Like think a very mature version of that could provide you some very precise answers, right? Then that would be amazing, right? So Google is going to essentially go to a better user experience, and so should we.
Makes perfect sense. One of my friends here from Facebook said something interesting about this latest update. He said, "Oh, here comes Google's TikTok update." Exactly what you said. Like the attention span, everything, like measuring the stuff out. We should be, you know, how everything should be predicted in terms of what needs to be served for our queries is really going to be exciting to look at. Well, man, thank you so much. You made my day. This is like such a nice Friday evening here at my side of the world. I hope everyone else enjoyed. Guys, go check out Outranking. Pankil is going to stay in our group as well. Other Outranking team members, ask them anything that you need. They've been super nice of giving 50% off. We're not gonna stop hanging together. So you guys will be seeing more and more of us talking. Go visit Workello.com. Go visit outranking.io. And I'll see everyone quite soon.
Thank you so much for having me, and it was a pleasure taking all the questions. If you guys have any questions, just drop it in FatGup, either of the groups, and I'm happy to answer, or one of the team members.
Thank you so much. All right, thanks, guys. Let's continue the conversation online, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon.